Welcome everybody to Metal Construction News 40th anniversary panel. We're celebrating, as I said, 40 years. I'm Paul Deffenbaugh, the editorial director for Metal Construction News. 40 years is a great time to look back, but we also want to look forward. And so we put together a panel here of industry thought leaders who are going to go into their prognosticating toolbox and come out with some great predictions for the next 10 years. It's an odd time to try to make predictions for the next 10 years, given that we're in the middle of a unique pandemic that nobody has seen and a unique economic environment. And maybe some of the very foundations of what we thought about this industry are changing as we sit here. But I thought it would be fun to have a conversation and get your perspectives.
I'm Jim Bush, Vice President of Sales and Marketing with ATAS International.
Art Hans, I'm president of Hans Construction, also proud to serve as president of the Metal Building Contractors and Erectors Association.
I'm Mike Peterson, president of Peterson Aluminum Corporation, based in Chicago here.
Nick Sabino, I'm the president of Deer Park Roofing in Cincinnati, Ohio, and the immediate former chairman of the board at the National Roofing Contractors Association.
My name is John Paul Lawrence, and I'm the president and publisher of Modern Trade Communications, Metal Construction News, and Metal Architecture magazines based in Skokie, Illinois.
I'm the director, Rob Haddock. I'm the director of the Metal Roof Advisory Group and the founder and CEO of S5.
I'm Steve Browning, president of Vulcan Steel Structures, and I'm currently serving as the chairman of the board of directors for the MBMA.
Thank you all for joining us this morning. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I'm looking forward to our discussion, which we're going to try and make as free-flowing as possible. But as I started to say, I think one of the things we want to talk about first is what are going to be the economic drivers for the next 10 years? What can people in the metal construction industry look for? That is it going to be educational market? What kind of, what kind of drivers are we going to see? And Steve, do you have a perspective on how we're going to begin there?
Yeah, Paul, I first and foremost want to thank you for having me. I appreciate and I'm honored to be part of this panel this morning. I think the number one economic driver, obviously, for our industry is a favorable economy. We have to have a favorable lending environment. We can't have too loose of a lending policy, and we can't have too tight of a lending policy. But we need low interest rates and certainly need optimism from the consumer. We're a big ticket item, and we need confidence from a standpoint of a business that wants to expand or build a new building. There has to be optimism from the consumer for our industry to thrive. I think also in the next 10 years, we've got to keep the cost of our products low and the return high. And steel products are great value where you get 40 to 50 years of service. It's an incredible return, and we've got to keep that value. It's very important that we maintain the edge over comparable materials. And I think we have to continue to embrace the changes and the improvements in our energy codes. The improved designs in regard to energy are essential for our industry to continue to thrive.
Thanks. And I want to come back to the energy question and the sustainability one a little bit later, and we'll certainly dig into that. But one of the things that caught my attention and what you're talking about is the importance of consumer confidence. And I think, Nick, probably you're the one who's closest to the consumer of this particular group. And what are you seeing in consumer confidence? And how do you feel that's going to change the next 10 years?
Well, currently in our environment with the pandemic, I'm seeing two very different consumers. I'm seeing the residential side of the business, which is very, very strong right now. And then the commercial business where uncertainty has crept in and everybody's kind of taking a wait and see approach. Drivers over the next 10 years, I think one of the biggest things for us is workforce and being able to onboard and train people. There's a major threat right now with the lack of workers able to install the products that we make. And I think that with that opportunity, or with the threat comes that opportunity. And, compared to everything else, the metal construction industry is very clean. It's very desirable, rather than tearing off other types of building materials, roofing systems. So I think that we have a great opportunity with our workforce. And another driver I could see really happening sooner rather than later is an infrastructure bill being passed that could benefit the industry tremendously. And I think there's bipartisan support for an infrastructure bill. It's nothing's going to happen before the election, but after the election, I think that that's something that we could expect, and that could really give our industry a boost.
And I want to circle back on the infrastructure, especially again, because I think that our understanding of what kind of infrastructure we need may be changing right now. But I was surprised by you saying that the residential side is so strong and the commercial side is not as strong. But ultimately, the consumer, the residential consumer, well, not completely residential, but the consumer is the driving force for the U.S. economy. Mike, do you see that any effect in your business from how consumer attitudes are changing, and what might happen from the consumer driving force for what kind of products they're purchasing and how they act?
Well, we're seeing pretty healthy business conditions right now. I'm actually worried about being late to the party in terms of being affected by the drop off in the economy. Most of the roofers I've spoken with have said we're busy now, but hunting hard for work in the fall. And I'm worried about the fact that one of my friends came up with the term, there's a bunch of zombie companies out there right now that don't know they're going down. And good example is like movie theaters. How many hotel chains are going to go out of business before this is all over, because travel has been greatly affected. There's just so many unknown variables right now with the unusual nature of the complete shutdown of our economy. Over the weekend in the New York Times, I saw that 472,000 construction jobs have been lost since March. So that might solve our labor issue. And there's probably going to be a lot of labor available for a short period of time. But you want to wonder about the demand ultimately.
And Art, I want to jump real quick to the labor question, because it's one of the things that seems clear to me is that we are having a short-term resolution to the labor problem, but the underlying problems with the labor shortage, especially the skilled labor shortage, are still there. People aren't coming into the labor market. And there might even be a chance that this downturn and how it's affected the labor force may scare people away even more from coming into the construction workforce. What do you think will happen over the next 10 years with the labor shortage?
Well, I think you touched on it a bit in your editorial in the last issue. Construction is not, it's a tough business at times, and we are going to see people migrating out of the industry as they did during the last downturn. I think the other thing that we're going to see, which really addresses your first question, probably one of the most dramatic effects on the economy as well as the workforce, is China. We are going to see a resurgence in manufacturing jobs, I believe. And when that happens, people would rather work in a factory in the middle of winter than out on a job site. So all of these factors, it's tough to predict exactly what will happen, but I think that any temporary help that we've had workforce-wise is going to be met with an increased challenge going forward.
Jim, are manufacturing jobs going to start coming back to the United States because of this?
Yeah, I'm going to echo Art's thought. I think you're going to see a resurgence in manufacturing. I think it's going to be kind of a shift in the type of work. Obviously, there's certain segments of the market that have been vastly affected by the events over the last 3 or 4 months. But I think at some point we're going to see that the shift occur, maybe from what some of the work that we've been kind of had the luxury of being involved in to date is going to switch and change. I think you're going to see a lot more in healthcare, manufacturing, and going back to that infrastructure and healthcare. I think that's going to be one of the key things that we're going to be looking at moving forward. So I think obviously we're all going to be affected at some point. currently things are pretty stable. Mike mentioned, that we haven't seen a big downturn. We're still pretty strong, but obviously, what we put on the building is kind of at the tail end of the construction cycle. So we're kind of still reaping the rewards of the past year or two, but we'll wait and see what happens in 2021 going forward. We're going to have to allow that shift to occur, obviously, going from some of the, the hotels and, those kind of things that we're going to have to allow that shift to occur, but that's going to take some time.
And Steve, you probably want to weigh in this. There's going to be almost a shift also from retail construction to warehouse construction, which will especially affect the metal building system industry.
Yeah, I've had several discussions with other members of the board, and we feel like we're going to see a resurgence in the manufacturing sector. We certainly have seen a loss in that sector over the last 10 or 15 years, and hopefully we'll see growth going forward as hopefully manufacturers come back to domestic manufacturing. So yeah, that could be a big positive for us as an industry to see that come back.
Well, I think that's also, I agree with Steve and what's been said about manufacturing. But I think it's also contingent on continued tax relief for employers. Tax incentives for capital improvements, lower tax rates. I compete with the federal government to expand my business. They take 42% of my income. And that's income that would be reinvested in my company if it were in my hands to reinvest it. It would buy, it would fund R&D, marketing and sales. It would increase my staff and provide jobs. It would buy manufacturing equipment to keep up with the sales that those people create. And it would provide jobs for the folks who produce that manufacturing equipment. And it would expand building programs, still more jobs to build and expand. It would also increase export sales for my company, which provides a larger U.S. tax base. All those things provide a larger tax base due to lower tax rates and other tax incentives. It's, that's just basic capitalism and it works.
So the whole manufacturing industry has become global and has gone to lowest labor markets to find labor. And I think that, if that stuff's coming back to the United States, do we need, are there things that can help make that happen in addition to what you just described, Rob? To bring back that manufacturing base?
Well, I think that the big part of it is tax relief for employers. Look, I'm a small company, and I know that it works for me, but it could work faster and better if I didn't have to compete with the government for that capital to invest in my own business. So, I mean, if it works for small companies, it'll work for companies, and it does work for companies much larger than mine, and it will bring manufacturing back to the U.S. Now, in some cases, when there are cheaters like China out there, some government intervention, some tariffs, which this administration has been activated, and I think that's appropriate when you have cheaters who are manipulating their economy, manipulating the currency.
What if I can just echo what Rob and was talking about in terms of manufacturing, and I think what this pandemic has taught us, if anything, if we've been open to receiving the message of what this pandemic has been teaching us, is that, not to get too far out there, but manufacturing strength of our nation is tied to a national security issue. That I think if we want to be a strong nation, we need to have a strong manufacturing base, and we need to have a strong economy and domestic economy. And when we were having problems getting aspirin, Band-Aids, bandages, because of the shortage. I mean, that really tells a big, a big story right there, a very critical one. So I think one of the drivers is going to be, what our next, what the administration, whatever our next administration is, what Congress really does too, and how they, tackle it. What are the incentives going to be, and how serious they are about getting us back into, the globalization is great and all, but we need to be strong first and foremost. And President Trump has been trying to make this case for the last 4 years, and I think we got to continue it, and that's going to be the big driver for us.
Are there on the labor side, Nick? Are there things that we can do governmentally or by industry, by association, that can affect the kind of change that will benefit our industry, our markets, our country, that we haven't been doing?
Sure. I think when we look at our career and technical education system in the United States, you've got the there's a group out there that says everybody has to go to college. There's also a group out there that is very active in the career and technical education, vocational schools, and as an industry, I think we've really been lost for a long time. I attended a Skills USA competition last year in Louisville, and there were 1,000 young men and women, very professional. They were constructing walls, doing electrical, plumbing. They get to the roof, they get to the exterior components of the building, and they stop. There was just no representation there. So that's one of the big things that we've changed. We're working with NCCER, the National Center for Construction, Education, and Research, to get roofing and sheet metal into the curriculum and updating that. It hasn't been updated since the late 1990s. And the only roof system in the entire curriculum is asphalt shingles. There's zero commercial roofing. So these are all things, partnering with these workforce development groups is really key to our success. There are people out there. The narrative that we hear is that nobody wants to join the trades, that these kids, they're lazy, and that's totally opposite of what we're seeing. When we go to talk to the construction schools, the vocational schools, what we see is a waiting list to get into the construction programs. If they can only hold 40 students, there's a waiting list to get in. So they might only be able to take seniors or juniors. And then we have to have a presence in those schools as well, for our trade. And that's something that we have to do a better job of, because I think for the last decade, we were really absent. And a lot of these folks are doing HVAC, they're doing electrical, plumbing, but not some of the other specialty trades, and that's where we need to be.
The skilled labor shortage, Jim, has been, it's not a new issue. I think I wrote my first labor shortage story in 1992. So this has been a cultural problem that we've been battling since then. But in the last 10 years, every survey we did at the magazine had some kind of, there's been a constraint on the growth of the industry because we can't find the skilled labor. And you guys at ATOS have probably experienced some of that, and you're a little bit removed from the front lines of it because you're a manufacturer. What's the connection, and what can manufacturers do to help on the skilled labor shortage issue?
Well, we try to be very engaged with the local community, inviting junior high school kids and even sometimes younger into our facility for tours various times throughout the year, just to expose them that there is a world out there beyond going a 4-year education at college. So I think it's the exposure very early on, and I think collectively as a related industries, a lot of related trade associations, we need to really bring in that proper curriculum at the trade schools and kind of band together to create that. So again, I think it's exposure, letting the people realize there is, you know, good high paying jobs out there in both the manufacturing sector as well as out in the trades.
One of the things I think that you run into, and somebody, I'll just toss this out, is that there are good high paying jobs, but building a career, especially on a job site, when you have economic downturns, can be kind of difficult. The first time an economic downturn comes to the construction industry, and we've been blessed to have one for a growth period for the last 10 years, but the first time it goes down, we kick the snot out of the labor force and people leave and don't come back. What can we, you know, Art, you have to go out and run a business every single day. Well, you all do, but as a contractor, you're going out every single day and trying to provide work and grow your company and provide opportunities for people. How do you make a career for somebody who comes into the skilled labor market?
Well, let's face it, I think that there is a core group that you're going to keep in your business no matter what the economy is. And, you know, you have to build a company that's strong enough to maintain that. I think that you also have to look at ancillary services that you can provide as a contractor that will take you through those tough times and allow you to keep those valuable people that you've trained. Ultimately, if you have a downturn like we saw in 2008, people are going to get laid off. We're fortunate right now in that we're still going along at a good pace. But I think that, you know, people have a short memory, and we are going to see a resurgence in manufacturing, which is going to drive our businesses. But there was a reason that manufacturing left to begin with, and that was because of uncompetitiveness. And we have to address that now to sustain that manufacturing resurgence. And we have to do it through promoting these careers in trades. And that's not something that the government is going to do for us. The Metal Building Institute is working on a program right now where we're preparing, if you will, a slideshow that each one of us can take to local schools. We need to get the message out there and start from the grassroots and build up and get people interested in trades. You know, we need that lobbying power from up above and from a governmental standpoint, but we also need to do our part to show kids locally what kind of a career that they can have. And until we fight that picture of a, you know, we always talk about this, the guidance counselor that's got a picture of a construction worker hanging in the office and saying, you don't want to end up there. So that's what we need to address. And we need to make sure that our crews are efficient and well-trained, and that'll help us more than anything to get through the tough times.
You know, I just echo what you are, in that I think you're absolutely right. We can't rely so much on the government to address this problem. It has to come from, you know, private industry. And, you know, I used to use the example of, you know, the public school system here in Chicago, that, you know, I was not a product of the public school system, but, you know, hearing stories from, you know, 20, 25, 30 years of what it was back then, you know, they prepared students either for college, you know, a college career, or they prepared students for the workforce, right? You turn 18 and you know, you know, we've seen problems, you know, that's based on around policy, and not just with Chicago public schools. I think the public school systems all across the country are facing this problem, and that, you know, they want to show success, and, you know, it's well, our students are, you know, a lot of them are not measuring the success of what they're doing based on who's entering the job force and what they're doing after high school. It's, hey, they're going to go to college, they're becoming this, and, you know, so I think it's, you know, it's up to private industry to kind of step in, work with these public school systems and say, all right, you know, we can help fill this void in getting these young men and women ready for the workforce in the U.S. and in our country, and also get the, convey the message, convey the idea, the notion that college isn't the end all be all. Sometimes I kind of look back and say, man, I wish I, after writing a check to my plumber thinking, oh man, I should have been a plumber. The guy's driving a better car than I am, but and when I was in high school, I never dreamed about being a plumber, but I think we have to, rewrite the narrative, if you will, and just for these students, for the young children, the young kids, and say, hey, you can have a great life. You're going to have to work hard, but you have to work hard in whatever it is that you do to be successful. So success doesn't come easy.
I sometimes wonder if the problem isn't more with all of us than it is with the schools and the government and everything, because we all want our kids to do better and to go to college. So we're out there pushing them too. And I think that, when you go to a cocktail party and all the parents are talking about the child that got accepted at Boston College or Penn State or whatever, there are parents who will not feel comfortable saying, my son has got a job as an iron worker, and he's now a lead foreman on a crew erecting 268-foot clear span buildings. It doesn't happen. So we have to look inside, and we have to change the way we as parents look at jobs.
So the importance of what Nick said. We have several leaders of trade associations for the industry on this call, and the tool and die manufacturers here in Chicago started an apprenticeship program on the west side of the city where, there's social justice issues, very hot topic right now, but they very successfully developed several, maybe 100 apprentices to feed their own industry by setting up training facilities. So that's the kind of thing I think we might want to look at over the next 10 years as a roofing industry.
I agree with that. Heartedly.
So I want to dig in more to this, Art, what you said, that kind of maybe some of the blame is on the parents and this kind of culture. You can't wave a magic wand, though, and make a cultural shift that all of a sudden people begin to value the labor people provide by working with their hands. It's something we've moved away from as a country. I do see, though, more and more in cocktail circles, people begin to go, there's a need for that. And is there a shift going on, a cultural shift, which will drive this need for acceptance of skilled labor?
I think that, there are people that are starting to talk about the need for trades. I think that I think the college is important. And certainly I'm promoting that my kids will go to school. My son is 14, and I would love nothing better than if he got involved in the business. Of course, by then I'll be too old to recognize it. But if he went to school and worked in the business, I think that would be the best outcome I could hope for. If you look at some of the European countries, the way Germany brings people up through trades, they have a career, and that career is served through the apprenticeship program, where they get their education and their practical experience at the same time. We've pretty much, except for some of the unions in the country, have lost that apprenticeship approach. We've wiped out any type of craft training in high schools. I went to a high school that had a welding shop, a wood shop, all types of shops, auto shop, and you were required to take some course in a shop-related course, and that's all gone. It's all gone.
Steve, are you seeing a change or in the type of applicants you're getting from for your positions on the floor?
Paul, we seem to be, I guess, having more discussion than we have in the past. about the workers and people going back to tech schools rather than colleges. And I think this change is going to take a number of years. And one driver, I think, that's creating a lot of this discussion is the fact that the colleges and the college tuition has gotten to be so expensive that it's driving the value of a four-year degree out of balance with the expense for it. So you see kids now making a decision to go to a vo-tech school and come out, and as John Paul was saying, there's a plumber making good wages for the education that he got. So, but it's going to take time. This is a cultural shift that will take a number of years to get back in line with what we have to offer. But it's, again, we're fighting not only a cultural problem, but we're fighting the fact that our industry is cyclical. And so we go through times where we hire as many people as we can, and then we go through times where we have to become lean and get through the toughest of times. So it makes it difficult to grow a workforce, to build confidence in a workforce to come into our industry. That's just the nature of it, and there's nothing we can do about that. But I am hearing more chatter, which is healthy for people interested in going to vo-tech school to learn different trades than I have, say, in the last 5 years or so. Have been more chatter than the previous 15.
I'm pretty confident that my parents, given the current college prices, would not have paid for my degree in philosophy so I could become a ranch hand. So I think there is a shift. Rob?
I said, go easy on the ranch hand. I'm an old ranch hand. Oh, that's
Ranch hand, one of the best years of my life working on a ranch.
I think
hard work.
I think the country also needs to understand that, and I hope I'm not speaking, out of line, but, when people think of, either trade labor or manufacturing labor, they don't understand that, speaking for today's world and always, it is necessary for a high level of aptitude to fulfill these positions. And I don't think people understand that. So if we make it where we say, there is a level of aptitude that's required, not everyone is going to be able to do it. Not everyone's going to be having the natural born talent, or the manual dexterity, the coordination. I mean, there are no more positions on manufacturing line, for the oil canner, the guy to make sure that the gears are oiled anymore. I mean, with modern machinery today, it's and automation, but there's got to be somebody there knowing how to have logic and reasoning skills and understand the systems and work those systems. So I think it's also, telling that side of the story as well, that, that adage of the hammer swinger, no, you're just not, you got to learn, you got to know how to work the tools, but you also have to understand what it is that you're doing. So I think
Nick, you started your business straight out as a roofing business, but so many people come to be contractors, owners, by coming up through the trade and learning on the job site how to do things, and then say, hey, I want to own my own business. Is there a way to support that as a career path to attract people that, yeah, I like paying that, as John Paul said, paying that check to the plumber. Well, he's paying the check to a business owner, not to the person on the job site. And there's a difference there. So how can we, support the person coming into the trades and show them that there's another opportunity there to learn the trade and then become a business owner? Is that a path?
Well, I think there's certainly a path there. And when we're talking about getting involved in schools, getting involved at orientation rather than at graduation, I think there's a path into sales. There's a path into project management. There's a lot of different ways for somebody to move up. Obviously, we don't want to promote somebody to turn around and be our competitor. But you know, since you bring that point up, one of the trends that we're really seeing a lot of right now is people that are working for us hourly and then come and say, hey, I want to be a subcontractor. You know, will you subcontract these jobs to us? And you know, we've always tried to encourage that hourly workforce. But you know, we really need to recognize that that business model is slowly fading away as more and more of these foremen that are good leaders, good teachers, are becoming subcontractors and effectively changing the way we see our workforce. And I don't necessarily think that that's a good trend, but that's the reality all across the United States, that that people are, there's less hourly employees and a lot more subcontracting going on.
And that also gives you the flexibility during the downturns and upturns to manage your business more easily.
That's correct.
Any last comments about the labor shortage issue and what we might expect over the next 10 years?
I agree with Steve's point concerning the you know, the cost of education. It's gone through the roof. I have 7 grandkids, and I'm starting college funding programs for all of them. But to kind of bring things back into perspective a little bit, I've been around the construction industry for almost 50 years now. And as Steve also pointed out, it is a fragile industry. It's because it's subject to external economic pressures. And I've watched booms and busts throughout the last 5 decades in the construction trades. And we've had the last several years have been a real boom, okay? And so every time that happens, there is a labor shortage. I've noted that when unemployment falls below 5%, there's a labor shortage. And I've got friends in the construction business. You know, I deal with those guys all the time. And they were literally pre-COVID, you know, they were hiring any warm breathing body that walked in the door as long as they could pass a drug test and would show up. And I did the same thing when I was in the construction business for more than 20 years. So I've seen those cycles come and I've seen them go. I think there is a trend due to the high costs of college these days, and due to just a kind of a metamorphosis in our society where working in trades is becoming more and more socially acceptable. When I was a kid, it was all about going to college. You know, parents that was the main goal, get your kid to college. I didn't go to college, was a big disappointment to my mother, but I've done okay in trades, and I think there are many others that do as well. As far as carving a path for an entrepreneur, I'm not sure that you can do that. I think that's just sort of an innate thing within a person. But there are plenty of opportunities out there to do that. To kind of pull things back into perspective, when we have unemployment rates below 5%, we're going to have labor problems. We're going to have labor shortage. And COVID may provide a temporary resolution to that to some degree, as long as we don't have to compete with the government once again. You know, in the recovery after 2008, because unemployment benefits were raised and extended, there were lots of people who weren't really motivated to go back to work.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Essentially, a good point to bring up, Rob, about what's going on with the pandemic now. And I'm going to ask you guys to kind of really take a 30,000-foot view of what's going on. One of the things that's happened is, and this panel discussion is one of the a great example of it, we've all learned how to work from home. And the necessity to gather into office spaces has decreased, and that can have significant impacts on our needs for office space, and have significant impact on colleges and universities that are now doing online classes more, that could even go all the way to infrastructure. There are fewer people going to jobs. Why do we need as much roadway or light rail as we have? Over the next 10 years, Mike, I want you to try and make a little sense of this for us if you can. Is this pandemic going to change what kind of construction we do and what the needs for what we do are over the next 10 years?
Well, okay, as an example, got a couple stockbrokers that I work with. None of them have been in their office since maybe February. I think we're going to see a massive shift in cities. It might result in larger exurb areas. I'm not quite sure. I think everyone's a little hesitant to get on a metro train here in Chicago or a subway. Are we going to see more automobiles, more auto traffic? There's going to be all kinds of massive changes that result from this, unless I guess we, get to antibodies or whatever, some way to get mass, immunity going. But I think it's going to have a profound effect on the construction industry, and it's going to be. It might not happen overnight, but you're going to see less restaurant chains. You're going to see less hotel chains. Schooling, good question. Universities, are they going to be a big source of $100 million buildings going forward? We haven't seen the ramifications of this yet.
Jim, you want to try and speculate and prognosticate on what the changes might be?
Yeah, I think the remote workforce is going to be more prominent in the larger cities just because of the transportation issues and the mass gatherings of going in a subway or taxis, even whatever it may be. We were operating at 50% capacity, kind of shifting, alternating who was in the office at one time for a while. It was successful. It worked. People were productive. But I will say there was a lot of miscollaboration that I think goes on face to face that in many cases, I'm happy to have the entire staff and team back together where we can gather, distantly in a room and discuss issues and so forth. So I think you can't take that away. But I think there's going to be a whole lot more liberty given to flexibility to have the ability to work from home on occasion. I think, obviously the days of trying to come in when you're not quite feeling well, we've all done it. Those days are gone, at least for the foreseeable future. So, I think you're going to see more remote working, but at the same token, especially the construction industry, there's a lot of collaboration that needs to be done face to face, and I don't think you can take that away.
Steve, is your office staff mostly working remotely, or?
No, we're working from the plant. I was certainly in agreement with what Jim had to say. As a manufacturer, we have to hand things off from one department to the next, and it's like a chain. And when one link in that chain is missing, the chain is broken, and we lose an awful lot of efficiency when we're missing. So in our business, we have to have the collaboration. Certainly, we're able to function, but the last 2 or 3 months we've proven we can function, but we do lose a lot of efficiencies when we're not sharing and collaborating and working together, because as the customers make changes, we have to change with them, and it helps for us to be together to communicate those changes in order to maintain the efficiency of the process.
John Paul, I'm hesitant to toss this to you, but you run a company that is predominantly went home during the pandemic, and probably all of us could have gone home. It's just unique exceptions.
Yeah. We all. Well, there was a point where everyone was working from remotely, and then we slowly introduced folks back. But I will say, I think all business, you need to have that, it's all about whether we like it or not within our own organizations or with our customers, colleagues in any industry. It's all about personal relationships. You got to have that personal interaction with people, with colleagues. That's where the ideas come. That's where problems, the solving a problem, an issue, you can address things right away. I think we're all more efficient and effective, I think personally, working together. We're political animals, right? I mean, we're by in the sense that we all need to, we're stronger together, in groups, and working from home, it was a necessity to flatten this curve, during the pandemic. I think for the most part, a lot of people, I've been, talking to people from all different walks of life, they're saying they are ready to go back in the office. They can't take any more Zoom meetings. I've seen studies where, online meetings, are more mentally draining on people, than face-to-face in-person, meetings. So, and just distractions. There's too many distractions at home, or, I think people are going to be ready to get back into work when they can and when they feel like it's safe to do so. But, I got to say, with what Mike was saying, people, aren't, taking the metros, or they're not, taking public transportation. During this whole time during the pandemic, I've never seen more traffic on the expressways on 90, 94. Our offices are right off of the Edens, and I've never seen more cars going down the expressway than I have during the last, 3-4 months, when people were told, hey, stay inside, And so, yeah, I don't know. It was interesting, but yeah, I think people are going to be ready to get back into their offices.
Paul?
Yeah.
To JP's point, we have an interesting situation at S5 because our manufacturing is all in North Texas, right? And you can't run machines from home, obviously. So same as Steve, that operation continues to function, and everybody goes to work. They're pretty vigilant. Management down at the plant is with respect to PPE and so on. In Colorado is the rest of all our corporate functions are in Colorado. Sales, marketing, everything but manufacturing is in Colorado. And pre-COVID, everybody wants to work from home. Well, why can't we work from home? Why can't we? So during COVID, of course, we essentially closed the office. We did everything on Zoom and so on, and it was quite effective. Not only interdepartmental, but even the sales and marketing team and so on. We did the Zoom, and still do. But it's interesting because several weeks ago, by state policy, we could reopen the office, okay? And we decided to do the staff in shifts, and we also gave people the option of, hey, if you want to continue to work from home, if you don't feel comfortable coming into the office, that's okay. Well, guess what? Everybody wanted to come back to the office. So I believe it was JP and others have said on this call that, there's no substitute for face-to-face interaction. And pre-COVID, they all wanted to work from home. And after they've done that for a couple of months, they're all ready to get back, because you do need that face-to-face interaction.
Especially those who have children, I guess. It's like my neighbor said, teacher always said the child was a delight to have in class, and now feels like maybe the teacher might have been exaggerating a bit. Guys, over the last 20, 30 years, one of the biggest changes we've seen in the construction industry that has affected us at every stage, from how we work to the products we produce, every point has been changes in our approach to energy conservation and sustainability. And this came up early in the conversation. I wanted to talk about it in more depth. We've got metal energy codes that are forcing us to build in certain ways, but we also have more market-driven things like LEED certification and AIA 3030 and the Living Building Challenge. And there have been huge and significant changes in what we're doing with buildings over that time. What do you think, and Rob, you're kind of closely attached to the solar industry, do you think that this kind of significant change is going to continue, or have we hit kind of a diminishing marginal return on our ability to build sustainably?
Well, I think both things are true, Paul. I think we are seeing a diminishing return, but we will definitely see more improvement to come. With technology and innovation advancing at the incredible rates that it is, it's hard to predict where and how, but change is always a certainty, and anything can always be made better. That's our company mantra. We have something really good, so now let's make it better. I don't claim credit for inventing that philosophy, but that's what every forward-thinking company does. There are some things, though, that I think are somewhat predictable because they make sense and have public support. You mentioned one of them in the solar space, but sustainable materials and construction, that's not going to change. It's supported by this generation of decision makers, and for pretty good reasons. We're seeing smart homes and smart construction in general. That's all part of that, with automated controls that conserve energy and cut costs and can be operated even remotely. More durable construction materials and methods that require reduced maintenance and have longer service lives. That just makes sense. I think that Joe Q. Public is really pretty much over the buy it cheap and fix it later kind of mentality that was common in this country several decades back. And metal construction fares very favorably in those areas. The solar thing, it's not a fad. It's here to stay. And it's here to stay because it makes good economic sense. All you have to do is pencil out the ROI, and solar becomes cash positive in 5 to 7 years, in some cases even less. And that just makes sense when a solar system lasts for 35 or 40 years. It's free power after it's paid for itself. So I think you're going to see both things happen. Yeah, it's getting kind of crazy in some sense in some areas, but in other areas it has a long way to go.
Nick, you're selling to homeowners and building owners. How does the sustainability and energy conservation message come across, and how accepting of it are they when you're?
Yeah, I think like Rob said, this is not a fad that's going away. It's here to stay, and that's the whole sustainability issue. One of the things somebody mentioned earlier, the German model and how engaged the Germans are with the workforce at a very young age. One of the things that our counterparts in Germany at the German Roofing Contractors Association, one of the things that they do is they sell sustainability to the younger workforce, and that's why they get them to join the roofing industry, the construction industry. When we think about it, we're insulating buildings. We're providing all kinds of sustainable products, recyclables. So I think that's an important component of what we do, and we need to remind everybody in our industry the purpose that we serve, and and that's something that really resonates, especially with the younger folks.
Mike, I just wrote an article about a house in Memphis that is going for zero energy, zero carbon, that just by coincidence happened to use some of your product. Is it becoming a massive driver for your product for your?
Yeah, okay. I wouldn't call it a massive driver, but we were proud to be a part of that building. And by the way, it's the 2030 initiative, not 3030. So,
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Being taught in all the architecture.
I'm 100 years ahead of my time.
No, I think the fact that our products are PET is a great marketing tool for our industry. And as an example, when solar reflectivity became an issue, you know, we were faced with a color chart that basically, I'd say maybe 50% of our colors didn't get past the 0.06 reflectivity number. We figured out a way to change our entire color palette over to the point where I think something like 80% of our colors are cool roof, you know, rated and acceptable for application. And we didn't do that because we thought 100% of the buildings were going to be designed for that purpose. We just kind of figured that architects want to design responsibly. And if they can pick up that kind of advantage by using our product, then it would help us sell our product more. And I think one thing the metal roofing industry has missed is our products hold up a lot longer than some of the other products. Now, I'm owned by a single-ply roofing company, but you know, their product deteriorates in terms of reflectivity over about a 5-year period. And you know, we've tested buildings that have been out for 25 years, and they still have, you know, within about 10% of the initial reflectivity that we had them, you know, when the product went out the door. So I've always kind of thought it's important that our products fit in terms of sustainable and resilient design. And both of those things may have lost some of their early panache, but they're very much in play.
You know, one of the things we keep seeing and we hear about on the manufacturing side is the difficulty of qualifying a product for a living building challenge to get it on the red list. And I don't know whether anybody's kind of dealt with that issue or not. Jim, whether you guys have kind of approached and figured out how to get your product on the red list and how important it is. That seems to be a real hurdle at this stage.
Well, obviously that red list is kind of in the painted metal industry, that's the difficult one to overcome. It can be overcome, that there are systems out there that can do it. But again, I also kind of look back and say, is there going to be a long-term durability? Some of these, you know, obviously the systems we use in the marketplace today, they're time proven. They've been out 40, 50 years with long-term warranties. You know, they're very corrosion resistant with the processes we do now. As we migrate to some of these newer technologies, I'm somewhat concerned that we may lose some of the ability to survive the elements for the same duration we have currently. So, and I often say, okay, we could provide a paint system that may be red list free, but what's going to happen in 20 years or 15 years when it has to be recoated? And what are you releasing into the air? So we're very cautious in our migration to that, you know, red list compliant. We do, you know, we get involved in some jobs that we do require it, and we make, you know, we proceed accordingly. But people at this point are open to listening to, you know, I'm going to say basically my argument of why we've got to be a little cautious in moving forward. And obviously metal in itself brings a lot of other attributes to the party, particularly longevity and resiliency. It's going to be there forever. It's not going to have to be replaced.
I think that we have to look at practical sustainability. I think there are times where people strive to get a trophy or something indicating that they're being sustainable, and they go through all these steps. The generation of capital requires energy, and a lot of that is fossil fuels. And if you're inflating the price of a building because of the sustainable attributes of it, you're burning more energy. And I think that, you know, I always equate where we've gone with a lot of our envelope steps and everything is telling someone to walk halfway to a wall, and then walk halfway again, and then walk halfway again, and keep doing that. Theoretically, they're never going to reach the wall, but sooner or later, they're going to have a sore nose. And we do need to keep striving to make these buildings better, but there are some great areas that are low-hanging fruit that are still there that nobody wants to address. We need to address those. We need to do the air infiltration studies and get that dialed in better on our buildings. But it has to be practical. It has to pencil long-term. If, as Jim said, you have a finish that goes south on you 10 years down the road, what are the environmental implications of that to go back and resurface that 10 years from now?
Steve, it seems like the sustainability and energy conservation issues have been driving innovation in the marketplace for the last 20 years or so. And I'm not certain whether how much it has been driving innovation for you guys, or whether there are other elements that are driving innovation in your products. Is it when you guys are innovating, is it a response to that, or is it a response to other things? I know that certainly technology has been part of that, but what is driving the innovation in the products that you guys are creating?
Paul, when you look at the basic components of a metal building system, not much has changed over the last 20 or 30 years. Certainly the standing seam roof innovation was monumental and continues to be the premier roofing system for our industry. But there's been more innovation in energy improvement and in building design than anything that I've seen in the last 30 years. And so it's important. We're responding to it. To answer your question, yes, it's a positive, and it's certainly vital to our industry. So, we'll continue to see, I'm certain, changes in the energy codes, or we'll continue to see a greater degree of acceptance of the changes. We still have some regions of the country that haven't adopted the current energy codes. But we're seeing it moving forward now, and I think it's a good thing. So it's a good thing for our industry.
One of the things that if you're working on a job site, you learn that figuring out how to put things together, how to install products, the most important part of what you're doing, knowing how to install it. And as we innovate, that changes, and we have to do more and more training with people. The question I'm trying to go through it, and maybe Nick, I'll get it to you, is are the issues of energy conservation and sustainability really driving training issues in the workforce for installing new products, accepting new products? Is it having an impact in that way, or?
Prior to COVID, as we talked about our workforce issues, we saw a lot of different innovations in roofing where the manufacturers were clearly trying to make installing a roof system much more labor intensive. I think that has been the biggest trend. I don't know if the sustainability and labor intensive, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. But that has been the biggest trend now with COVID. I think we could see a shift back towards that sustainability. But again, it's usually there's usually a little more labor involved when we're dealing with those products and those systems, which obviously has implications from a training standpoint.
But Art, you brought up one of the issues that could be driving this is getting air infiltration issues, and that is a labor intensive. Making sure you get the installation installed correctly is a detail-oriented task that requires training. And it's also a poorly trained person can completely undermine the ability to get a building properly wrapped up. Are we butting up against sustainability and energy conservation improvements butting up against our ability to be detail oriented? Are we requiring people to be too detail oriented in construction?
I think that, and I'll throw this to Steve, we need to look at some of the areas. Right now, the roofs are pretty well dialed in the wall systems, particularly with the insulated metal panels. But we still have great big C channels at all of our overhead doors that are uninsulated. We still lose a lot of energy up at the eave struts. You know, there's different places in the building where we're just bleeding out energy. And unfortunately, we often in the metal building industry get looked at as a cost-effective solution. So people tend to look at that bottom line, you know, pretty hard. And to remedy those short circuits in our buildings is going to require labor, and it's going to require training. And now the question is, do people want to pay for it?
There's a history in the construction industry, and when I was working many, many years ago on the job site, the phrases you would often hear were, you can't see it from my house, good enough for government work, we're not building pianos here. There's an attitude of kind of a brutality to the installation of the products that we're now requiring with new products and higher sustainabilities and more detail. We're requiring that workforce to take a different attitude towards what they're doing. Nick, is that when people are coming to your company and you're talking to employees or potential employees, is that something that you're looking for? Somebody who has that kind of detailed mentality?
Absolutely, that's something that you're looking for. I think from a project management standpoint, we tend to, as contractors, shy away from the products that are more labor intensive. And I'll give you a perfect example. Cementitious concrete cement siding. You can't install that. If you take out the manufacturer's installation book and you try to install that per how the manufacturer wants to install it, you have no chance. And that's in building code now. That building code says install it this way and per the manufacturer's installation instructions. So we tend to shy away from, the more complicated that is, the less chance I want to run a project, sell a project, do a project with that type of detail in there. There's just other products that are easier to install, cleaner to install, and I don't have to worry about being involved in a lawsuit because I didn't install it correctly because page 32 says to do this. You know, so I just think that that's the easier systems to install, the better. I'm all for training and attention to detail, obviously, in high quality systems, but there comes a point when you just say enough's enough and you move on to something that's easy to install.
I think that, and it kind of ties back into the workforce issues too. I think that going forward, we're going to see more and more of the manufacturers pushing for more modularized construction, where we get a wall assembly that's assembled in the factory, excuse me, taking that insulated metal panel concept to a larger application. You know, we can, again, China has, you know, they've used robots in construction. They're looking at, you know, prefabricated units to build buildings with. It's impressive what they do over there. We're a bit behind the curve here in that.
Metal building systems have always been kind of predicated on the idea of efficiency of construction, though, right? So in a way, they are built on that. And so I think somebody brought up the cost component issue. You're selling it as a more efficient, less expensive way of doing a building. Cost always seems to be in opposition to quality when you're talking to a consumer. Steve, how do you get this idea of a metal building system is, yes, it's highly efficient, yes, it's a cost efficient way of building, but it is an absolutely quality, sophisticated product?
We as an industry have faced a difficult challenge with the architectural community, trying to get just that point across, trying to influence architects to use metal building systems in a more favorable fashion. So we've got our work cut out for us. We recognize that. We've formed committees. The architectural committee was formed this year to address the fact that we're not educating old school architects or doing a good enough job in the curriculum for the new architects to understand the benefits of metal building system. So we hopefully will gain some traction in the next few years to win some influence and change the thinking of how you can best use a metal building system, because we're confined to the industrial part. We're building systems now that are, when finished, make dramatic effects visually. So it's we're capable as an industry. We just need to educate, I think, the specifiers and the architects and the end users about the benefits of a metal building system, and we're working toward that.
As a manufacturer, figure out a way to take labor out of the installation of your product. You've basically just made your product more attractive to your customer base, and in this case, a roofing guy. And so we're always trying to work on little things that might make our product a little quicker to install, cheaper to install, but not necessarily affecting the quality of the product.
Mike, one of the things that's happened in some product lines is the supply chain has become more consolidated and the manufacturers doing the installation, or at least the distributors doing installation. Do you see a potential for that kind of supply chain consolidation to happen?
Well, we've seen roll-ups of roofing companies. That's a new phenomenon over the last 15 years. Frankly, you mentioned distributors. 40 years ago, when my career started, distribution wasn't a big part of the roofing industry, and now distributors are essentially a banker to the industry. So there have been some interesting changes over time. Back in the day, companies like Owens Corning had big training programs for all their customers, and that seems to have migrated away from the manufacturers and out to the distribution side of the business. So there have been quite a few changes over the 40 years that this magazine's been publishing.
Toss you the high level, pull this all together kind of question. We've talked about labor shortage. We've talked about manufacturing improvement. We've talked about economic drivers for the next 10 years. And we've talked about sustainability and energy conservation. You have a unique view of the industry. You talk to everybody across all elements and you hear what's going on. What are the things that are really driving, what are the things when you talk to people in the industry that are most on their mind for the next 10 years?
A big thing that's been coming up, in the last couple of years now is, 3D printing technology, and, what that's going to, how's that going to affect our industry? Because now, they're finding out you can 3D print metal, and any kind of metal, Now, it's currently at the stages where it takes, a lifetime to 3D print anything big enough, right? For what we do, or what our industry is going to need it for. But, it's hard to say that, well, that technology is never going to get there. It's going to get there. And, will it get there? What will the 3D printing technology look like in 10 years from now for our industry? And that's a tough question. I think it's going to, in my opinion, I don't think it's in 10 years, it's going to be, at the point where we can really use it in our industry, but eventually it's going to get there, but I think we're going to see a lot of progress and development made in 3D printing, for little, for minor components.
Well, I just wanted to comment on the China situation. I went to China in 2019, and I attended their technical symposium and their waterproofing show. And I would be cautious to think that anything innovative is going to come out of China for the metal roofing industry. And my point, Europe's a whole nother story, but the Chinese, one of the technical symposiums was concerning standing seam roofs. And I sat in and I listened through the translation, and they were talking about all these airports, and everywhere they put on a standing seam roof, they were leaking. And at the end, they came to the conclusion that standing seam roofs needed underlayment. They had been installing roofs without underlayment they're in very cold and climates like Chicago, and they're installing roofs without underlayment. So I was just really, really shocked at how far behind us is, especially from a manufacturing standpoint, from a technical standpoint, from a design standpoint. You know, you hear the stories about them leaving the top 2 floors of the buildings vacant because they leak. And, you know, so let's be careful not to give them too much credit, because their show and what they're doing is really, really decades behind what we're doing here in the United States.
Gentlemen, we're kind of coming to a close here, but I do want to ask each of you to put on your reach into your prognosticating toolbox and kind of share what you think, what is going to get your attention, over the next 10 years. What are you going to be focused on? Is there some issue you want to solve? Is there something you're anticipating and looking forward to happening? Is there an idea that's got you intrigued that you're reading more about and following it, and this is something that could become important to the industry? I apologize, I didn't prepare you all for that question, so I'll give you a moment to kind of absorb that, and if you have an idea, just start up, and first person who comes up, we'll start there.
You know, it's too bad Mike McGrath couldn't make this call, because they're one of the most innovative metal companies I've seen. Looking back 40 years and then extrapolating forward, what I'm seeing is more combinations of our materials used on commercial projects, 3 or 4 different roofing profiles, wall profiles, wood grain, you know, finishes, metallic look-alike finishes to emulate Core-10. So, you know, we're seeing a lot. Architects are realizing our product brings color to the project, so you can basically really take advantage of our product line to dress up your building, if you will. And so going forward, I see that as a trend. Looking over the next 10 years, I'll be focused on retirement.
You know, one of the things that I think our industry needs to understand is, you know, what these systems, how they all interact with each other. You know, as a single skin panel manufacturer, we're relying on insulation materials, air barriers, other things to really bring the wall system together. And I think, you know, our industry, or at least, you know, in single skin side of metal panels, I think the ability to really understand on how these products work as a whole, to offer better guidance for the design community, you know, whether it be, you know, from energy efficiency to fire codes. There's a lot of changing technologies, and that can vastly affect the way these systems come together. And you know, something new comes out here, but it may affect, you know, the other product, if you will. So I really think it's an overall understanding of the science behind what we do.
Art, what are you looking at for your company and for you over the next 10 years?
We, you know, we're working on a succession plan, but as we do that, we look at a 5-year and a 10-year plan, and we try to identify what industries will be emerging, and so we're targeting those. I think that the other thing that we're doing, we have a very long-term relationship with a specific manufacturer of metal buildings. Our business has been helped by looking a bit outside of that for some of the components. We now do work with ATAS, and we incorporate that into the buildings that we build. Other manufacturers, as we were saying earlier, this just makes our end product for the owner more robust. And if you look at the buildings over the last 10 years that have received the MBCEA Building of the Year award, they have gotten so much more aesthetically pleasing, and pretty much unidentifiable as a metal building. Excuse me, and that's because of bringing other manufacturers' products to the buildings. The other thing is that as I change my role in our company, I look to spend more time on this workforce development and motivating younger people to get involved with trades.
Rob, you are have spent a career looking forward to what the next opportunity is. What are you looking forward to the next 10 years?
Well, sometimes the future fools me, Paul. But you know, personally, I'm building a plan of bringing up the next generation. I'm going to work for a long time longer, but I'm not going to work forever. I think if I can interject a kind of a new thing here, you know, most of the things we've talked about in this meeting actually favor metal construction as I see it. But I think one of we've talked about sustainability and durability and those kind of things. I think that, and we talked about solar. I think that our roofing systems, standing seam, I'm speaking as standing seam metal roofs. You know, our industry did a research project and a survey that proves the life of a metal roof is beyond 60 years. This is the best kept secret in the whole construction community. I mean, people don't know. We've got to get that message out, and I think that presents an enormous opportunity. We talked about solar, and solar has a life of approximately 35 years right now, and it's getting better all the time. You put solar on any roof other than metal, you know, on a commercial industrial project or even a residential project, you'd be replacing the roof before the life of the solar has expired. So a roof costs from you know, let's just say $4 to $6 or $8 a square foot, and the solar that's on top of it costs $35. What kind of sense does that make? We've seen solar driving decisions to metal for roofing decisions. People are re-roofing with the intent of installing solar, and it's actually driving their decision to metal. I think it's the best kept secret. I think we need to extol our virtues more than we have been as an industry, and I think that the future and the outlook for the metal construction industry is really a bright one because of many of the things we've talked about here in this call.
Nick, you're looking forward for your business. You got to constantly reinvent and look for new opportunities and make sure you're staying reacting to what your market wants. What
Sure.
What do you think is going to get your attention for the next 10 years?
Well, I think you're seeing a lot of the trend in roofing is that you have either a gigantic, large roofing company or a very small company. The middle-sized, mid-sized roofing companies are really going to fade away. I think you know, we talked about there's a lot of roll-ups and things like that. I think you're going to see a lot more vertical integration. I think at some point you could see a large distributor, a large manufacturer buy a roofing contractor that has a nationwide footprint. You know, 15 years ago, you know, there weren't any $100 million roofing companies. Now we have scores of them. And you know, I think that as we see private equity get involved in the roofing industry, you could see some dramatic changes to where somebody installs a roof, they're their own distributor, they're their own manufacturer, you know, and I think that's something that we should be aware of. That's probably more on the 10-year side than the 2-year side. I think it's hard to predict what's going to happen in 2 years with what's going on right now. You know, I know that roofing is when the pandemic started, roofing contractors had plenty of backlog. we were already going to be busy for the first half of this year anyway. So we haven't really felt the impact yet. I know we're seeing credit issues with some of the roofs that we put on earlier in the year, where we're getting notices and things like that. So I think it's really difficult to predict the short term. But I think the long term, we're roofing professionals, and we'll figure it out, and we'll move forward.
Steve, idea about what you're going to be focusing on?
Well, you really have to look backwards at what technology has done for our industry. And internally as a manufacturer, we've come so far in our design ability and our estimating abilities, detailing abilities. We've moved because of technology. We're more efficient. We're able to do things in minutes that used to take days to do. So it's really exciting to think about where we're headed in that regard. And as fast as we're moving, and as fast as technology is being innovated, you have to get excited when you think about what it can do for your business in the next 10 years. So we're going to embrace all those changes and try to get the most out of those internally that we can. Externally, we've again have to do a better job as an industry to educate the consumer about metal building systems. We've got some work to be done there. So that I think we need to spend a great deal of our time as an industry association in promoting the benefits of the metal building system.
John Paul, I'm going to give you the last word on this one to wrap us up. And what are you looking forward to for the next 10 years for the industry?
Well, so what I'm looking forward to is well, I can't really speak the next 10 years like everyone said. It's hard to kind of predict where things are going to be. Definitely, as Nick pointed out, with given the time that we're going through right now. But I believe that we'll see we'll see a rise of or an increase of or emergence of newer companies. I think we'll see our industry expand. We'll see new introduction of new companies coming in. I think we'll see a much more greater, and I wish again Mike McGrath was here, because I think really we'll see a much greater expansion on the fabricator side of things in the industry and the role that they play. And again, I think Mike would have brought a really good perspective on that. But I like to watch and see what the fabricator side is doing, and I think we'll start seeing a lot more of them and their role increase significantly in the industry in the next 10 years. So.
Well, I wanted to thank all of our panelists for participating today. A great discussion on what we can anticipate in the next 10 years. It is a unique time to be thinking about these kinds of things, given that there's a pandemic and an economic downturn in front of our noses, and it's hard to think past that. But you guys, great job, and thank you so much for participating today. Thank you all.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Well.
Thank you.